Hello and welcome to this week's video tutorial for virtualracingschool.com, where we return to Road Atlanta for Season 4 of the iRacing Blancpain GT3 series. The combination is also featured in the upcoming Petit Le Mans endurance race this weekend. Last season we were with the BMW Z4, and as a result I thought we should take the opportunity this season to run through a lap with the Audi R8 instead. It's also worth me pointing out that the new surface model this season has had an update, and as a result lap times and grip behaviour have changed ever so slightly, hence why we're generally seeing quicker times this time around. So although a tough circuit with the Z4, it's arguably a bigger challenge with the Audi, given its high speed corners with large curves and huge elevation changes. As the Audi works the rear tyres harder throughout the corners, it can be easy to overdrive around here and lose control of the rear end, especially when using the curbs, as is generally necessary around here for decent lap times. So, it's normal procedure here. I've set a qualifying fuel lap in default afternoon weather, which I will play through for you first before then going into further analysis. So that was a 1 minute 18.665. By no means a perfect lap, and unfortunately I lost a tenth in the first corner alone, but nonetheless a good lap to review. So we'll go back to the run down through the last corner. Obviously you want as wide an entry through the last corner as possible to allow yourself to carry as much speed through here. Obviously you don't want to be lifting at this point, so that you have a nice fast run down towards the first corner. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I lost a tenth of a second here versus my optimal, and the reason for that was I was just a little bit too late at turning in, so I kind of missed the optimal apex really, so I was just a little bit too wide at the apex. But otherwise it was good. So if we just have a look at that, so braking is going to be basically where this pit wall ends. So this wall here, as soon as that ends you want to hit the brakes. That should be in your peripheral. Obviously you want to be looking to the apex at that point. The other important thing is to not turn in too early. So I'm right at the very edge of the track at this point when I start braking, and also it's a very fast sweeping first corner, so you want to be carrying a lot of speed through. So as a result you don't want to be braking too hard. So notice at this point I'm only 40% or so on the brake pressure, and if we just bring it through, will see that I'm already bleeding off the brakes ever so slightly as I load the car up with steering input. So I was just a little bit too late to just to turn in. So at this point here, I'm not turning in hard enough. Basically, that's the issue that I've had. But it's very, very fractional. It's minor. But yeah, if I just turned it a little bit harder, I would have got myself to the apex just a bit tighter. So at this point, I'm almost off the brake pedal entirely, and I'm still carrying a lot of speed. I'm also in, I believe, 4th gear. There we are, 4th gear, and I'm trail braking for quite a long time, especially because I know that I've run a little bit too wide, and I'm sort of remaining on the brake pedal there just very slightly for a long time, right up until I make the tightest part of the corner for me, which was a bit too wide, as I've said, the point where I get onto the throttle. So there's no coasting for me here at all. It's brake hard, bleed off, but keep the trail braking on, keep it on, then hard on the throttle. Yeah, so notice how on the exit it takes me a long time to get to full throttle, and that's also a result of being just a bit too wide at the apex. I've had to hesitate just a little bit more, but yeah, you still want to, your throttle application always needs to be quite aggressive initially. So I'm hard to about 80%, and then I wait for the car to be settled, and then I get to 100%. And then obviously you want to be bringing the car over to the middle of the circuit on the exit. Basically you want to be as tight on the exit as you can for the speed that you've got. So basically if you're over here on the exit, then it means really that you've probably carried a bit too little speed through turn 1. So you want to be sort of in the middle of the circuit at this point, but as a result of maybe a bit closer to the left-hand edge actually, but as a result of carrying the speed through turn 1. So yeah, as we approach turn 2, which is obviously blind on entry, there isn't really much in the way of a reference apart from this small group of trees up here. It's basically just going to be a matter of driving laps and trying to find yourself a rhythm, and you'll have things in your peripheral which will cue your brain as to when to turn in, and so it's just a matter of finding a rhythm there that works for you. But so as I turn in left, I kept my foot at full throttle there for a good portion of time. So I'm full throttle, but I'm also steering to the left. So I only really start braking when the curb on the left comes into view. Just before that, actually. I mean, it's very hard to tell. So if we just have a look at that, yeah. So there's a grey patch of the grass which is just before the curb. So if your eyes are keen enough to spot that, that's, I would say, when you would want to be starting to brake. So the other thing to mention is that I've brought the car back over to the left, quite close to the edge of the circuit on the left here, when I start braking, and also I'm braking very, very little. So my maximum input there is about 30%. So I'm kind of rolling the car through here, and also because I'm turning and the elevation is kind of cresting, the car's quite light, so if you brake too hard you're definitely going to unsettle the rear of the car, and obviously you don't want to do that. You want to keep the car nice and stable through this section. So keeping the car over to the left, as the right-hander approaches, I just begin to increase the brake pressure once again. So that was very subtle, but if I play it through, so I'm on the brakes, off the brakes, back on the brakes. Now it's only about a 10% change there. I don't come off the brakes fully, and I certainly don't go back on them fully either. So you need to be quite precise excuse me, with your braking input at this point. So before I start turning right, I'm still turning left at this point, I've kept the car over to the left hand edge of the circuit to give myself the widest entry into turn 3, to open up the radius of the corner as much as I can so that I can carry as much speed through it as I can. And also the line through here is not quite optimal for me. I'm just a little bit wider than you can afford. So it's still good. It's a blind corner, so it's very hard to judge this. It's just a matter of timing. But you can afford to straddle this curb here just a bit more than I have done. Basically, you want to get as close to the inside before getting a 1x and a penalty. So, also worth noting, this curb can be quite aggressive if you don't straddle it just right. So I wasn't quite straddling it far enough, so the car was slightly unsettled. And notice as I'm on that curb, my throttle is basically 0. So again, it's a common theme with this car. When you are going to use curbs, which you can do, you have to be off the throttle and off the brake. So I let the car settle, let the car land. If it's bouncing slightly, I'll wait for that to settle before getting back on the power. Now, I'm only at about 60% initial throttle there because I'm still cornering quite aggressively, and I'm traction limited as well, so we don't want to induce too much traction control because it's not always going to save us. And then you want to obviously keep a nice tight line through the left-hander. Now this following sequence is very important in terms of line, because you have a connected sequence of, I think, about 4 corners, and so the line in the beginning is going to basically dictate, or to a large part dictate, your line through the rest of the sequence. So I was just a little bit too wide exiting turn 3 there, which has put me a bit tight on the entry into, I believe this is 4, which has meant that I've had to lift out of the throttle a bit more than I would say is optimal. But it's something that I've had to do, and that's important really, to recognise when you are not quite on the optimal line or the optimal speed, and to compensate for that and react to that as quickly as possible. It's why having driving awareness is extremely important, as just having outright speed. So I'm trying to bring the car back over to the left, which is why I'm not able to get to full throttle for a long time. And the reason why I want to do that is because when you start turning in for the downhill right here, you want to be as wide as you possibly can in order to get through here near to full throttle. So unfortunately I just turned a bit too late into this one again, and I don't hook up with this curb on the right. So I was just under half a car length wide of, it's probably less than that, it's a couple of feet wide of what would be optimal through here. But it does allow me to keep the throttle pinned at least, which is good. It just means that I have to cope with the car running over onto this curb on the left at the bottom, which can be quite tricky. So when you do go on this curb, obviously you might be full throttle, so you need to have the steering really neutral when you go onto that curb, otherwise again it's going to upset the car and potentially throw you off. So the run to turn 5, which is obviously you're carrying a lot of speed at this point. Basically the braking zone is uphill, So you can carry quite a lot of speed and brake very late into here. And I'm braking just on this curb. Well, I'm braking just before the curb, if we have a look at that, but what I meant was I'm allowing my right side wheels to run over the lower part of the curb as I run up towards the apex. Now, braking into this corner is quite, you can be quite firm with the pedal, so I'm over 50% here, and then it's a fairly short braking zone, because again it's quite a fast corner. Having said that, you don't want to be in a position where you come off the brakes too soon and therefore carry too much speed through the apex, and because you'll end up being forced wide up onto the right hand curb on the exit. So if we just take this through, just trail braking, we just take it back again, just trail braking there just before the apex. Now you can afford to just grab this inside curb like I've done there. That's not a problem as long as you don't overdo it, and then be very, very progressive with the throttle on the exit, depending on line really. If you're tight, then you can afford to get harder and earlier on the throttle. If you've got a bit more speed and you are sort of running out of track, then you want to delay that throttle application. So I was quite tight on the exit this time, which allowed me to get to full throttle fairly early and not use too much of the exit curb, which can be quite dangerous. You can afford to use a lot more of it, to be honest, but generally you want to be as tight as you can. But where I am positioned right here kind of shows me that I probably could have carried just a fraction more speed at the apex, because there's a little bit more track available there. So then run down to turn, I believe this is, let me just look at my, this is turn 6. Obviously you want to keep the steering nice and neutral, just bring the car gradually in a diagonal line, direct line to the leftmost edge of the track as you approach turn 6, which again is going to be an uphill braking zone. So although it's a very fast corner, you can afford to brake fairly hard. So again, just below 60% there, I would say, but quite a short braking zone, because I want to carry speed into the apex rather than just stopping the car. And also notice when I start braking, I'm literally right at the edge of the track to open up the radius of the corner as much as possible. And this was quite a nice line for me here, nice and tight at the apex. A bit of coasting there. It's very difficult to see, but I am just breathing on the brake pedal there. If I was pushing a bit wider, I'd be pressing slightly harder just to bring the car back in. And then there is a short section of throttle, short spurt of throttle, very briefly at full throttle. So I'm initially at 60%, briefly up at full. But notice how on the exit I'm again using the full extremity of the circuit and more, I would say. Just a bit too wide really. Very lucky to get away with that. And the reason that you want to be nice and wide on the entry here is because you have a super long straight following this turn 7, and it's all about the exit, so you need to prioritize your exit speed here more than your entry speed. So it's going to be a fairly late apex, a fairly late turn in as well, and you're going to be braking and slowing the car a bit more on the entry, so you can get a nice tight exit with an early throttle application. So we're on the brakes here, just trail braking, getting the car to where I want it to be, and then nice and early on the throttle and getting to full power as soon as you can afford to. Obviously your traction limited again. I believe it might be the slowest corner on the circuit. It is in fact. So yeah, so letting the car use all of the track on the exit, assuming that you have the speed to kind of force you out there. It can be quite easy to just carry a bit too much apex speed and run out of track effectively onto the grass on the exit, which obviously is not good, but that's cutting it about as fine as I would ever recommend you. So, and then as you run down the long run, you keep it tight on the left, gradually diagonal, straight line to the right here, keeping it nice and tight down towards the chicane. And then the final chicane can be sort of tempt you into braking too late. You can afford to brake late, obviously, but the important thing is to cut the first part of the chicane as much as you can afford to before getting a 1x or a penalty, and basically to sort of come off the brakes and carry the speed through there. And also you want to kind of have a nice tight line to set up the exit, but we'll get to it. So in terms of braking references, there are some lines on the circuit, and there's also a marker board, but you're braking about 100 I would say 110 meters, maybe 120 meters in fact, and this first line here is at the 100-meter mark, so it might be actually 100 yards. Either way, it's 100 units of something related to distance. So my peak brake pressure there is the hardest at any point on the track, because the circuit kind of levels out, so the car kind of compresses because it's a downhill run. So you can afford to brake very, very aggressively relative to what you would normally do with this car. So I'm sort of around 70% there, maximizing the grip available and bang on threshold braking. And then, as usual, as the speed comes off, I start to very gradually bleed out of the brake pedal, and as I turn in, it's important not to turn in too late into this chicane. I'm still braking, then just a bit of trail braking depending on what the car's doing. If the car turns in well, then get off the brake, because you'll have too much oversteer, and you'll end up oversteering too far over to the left. And then just kind of feather the throttle, play with the throttle, just to bring the car to position it where you want it to be, so that the all-important exit here through the second half of the chicane, where it's super important to get your line right, your turn-in point timed absolutely right, and then getting on the throttle nice and early there to about 70 or 80%. Again, going to be traction limited, and then full throttle quite late there really. And also, unlike the Z4 last season where I chose to short shift up into third, I've held it this time longer in second, but I'm not getting to full throttle, so sort of play about with that and see what works best for you. So I'm using all of the track there on the exit, up onto the curb, keeping the car nice and straight as possible, within reason, as you crest underneath this bridge, and then let the car, because the car will get really light there and you'll get some oversteer, so it's really important to keep the car nice and straight at that point. And then you want to be aiming to having yourself as wide an entry as possible into the last corner, so basically so you can keep the car flat out, and not run out of track on the exit. So basically turning in as late as possible there, and don't hit this curb. It's a recipe for disaster, but do get as close to it as possible. So that was really nice. I'm almost up on it, so that's pretty much bang on, and then you'll be able to keep it absolutely flat out all the way down through and then across the line. Okay, and so that was a qualifying lap tutorial at Road Atlanta with the Audi. As ever, you can find all setups, replays, and telemetry for your own use and analysis on virtualracingschool.com, where you can also book one-on-one tuition with top drivers from the likes of Coanda Simsport. So good luck for this week, and those who are racing the Petit Le Mans, and feel free to post any questions or comments below. Thanks for watching.